This video is about dimensional analysis, which is something that every chemistry student needs, and you'll use it in physics also at times and in other places. But what you're doing with dimensional analysis is using fractions to change one unit into another. And these fractions are always going to be expressing a true relationship between two different units or two different dimensions, and I'll show you an example and explain with the example in a moment. When the factors are arranged correctly, the units will cancel out, and that is really helpful because then you know what the right answer the right answer is just a matter of calculator work after that. So let's have an example. Suppose I wanted to ask the question, how many feet are in 60 yards? This is a very simple example because most people know already how many feet are in 1 yard, but this will just help us illustrate how this works. So when you're doing this, you need to think of this as something you're starting with. In this case, we have 60 yards, and something you want to end with, and that will be some number of feet. And if you can think of it that way, it's helpful. So I see a lot of people do it, set this all up by kind of creating one long fraction bar, and then they divide up their fraction bar into segments by crossing the fraction bar with lines at different spaces. And you start with your first number on the left-hand side and the top of the fraction bar, if it's supposed to be in the top of the fraction bar. Some numbers that you begin with are actually fractions themselves, but in this case 60 yards would be the same thing as 60 over 1. And so in the next little block of fraction space, you're going to use your conversion factor to turn 60 yards into something at least closer to feet. You may be able to go all the way to feet. So we ask ourselves, what do we know that relates yards and feet? Is there one thing we can think of that relates yards and feet? That's going to be our conversion factor. And we know that 3 feet is equal to 1 yard, and we're going to use that relationship as our conversion factor. So what you want to do is you want to arrange the parts of this relationship in this fraction space so that yards is going to cancel out with yards by placing yards on the bottom of this fraction and putting 3 feet in the top. Now, if I were doing this in a proper math form, this would be inside parentheses, and this would be perhaps inside parentheses as well, and we would multiply two fractions together like that. This little format of having this long fraction bar broken up by these cross bars, it just simplifies that a little bit. And so what we want to look at now, and what I want you to see, is that when this is arranged properly, yards in the top fraction here and yards in the bottom fraction here will cancel each other out, just like if I wrote 7 times 3 over 7. What would that be? The answer to that is 3, because, or 3 over 1, because 7 is in the top of a fraction here, and in the bottom of this fraction over here, they will ultimately cancel out. You will do 7 times 3 divided by 1 times 7, and the 7's factor out, and so you can just get rid of them already. So your answer is 3. Same thing goes with words and letters, such as these units of yards in this case. So all we do is we show that those are going to cancel out, and the only letters we have left are feet, which is the letters of our final answer that we want. And so when all that's done, you multiply the top of the fraction times the top of the next fraction, and that's going to give you 180. Bottom of the fraction times the bottom of the next fraction, that's going to give you 1. And the only words or letters we have left is feet. So our answer is 180 feet. I'll show a couple more examples on the next video.